Shalom, shalom, shalom. This is Rabbi Moshe Otero, Ways of Israel. Continuing with the series of kosher diet, or to be a Jew, kosher dietary laws. We are going to continue to finish this chapter. There are some miscellaneous prohibitions according to Jewish law. For example, the forbidden by the Torah is the sciatic nerve, known in Hebrew as gid hanasheh, which runs through the hindquarters of the animal. This part is prohibited in eating, the actual nerve. When the sinew and the adjoining blood vessels are removed, the hindquarters of the animals may be eaten. The cutting out or purging out of the sinew was done by some Jewish communities, Sephardic in particular, throughout history, and is done also in Israel today. This is why you'll find in some places you can have filet mignon, which is from the back part of the animal. In the United States, it's not economically feasible for the meat industry and invest many hours on purging of the sinew, and it's a very time-consuming task. And not everyone in the area of the butchers know how to do this. As a matter of fact, many Cuban butchers who happen not to be Jewish, they know how to do it. There are many butchers who possess the special skills required for the task, and the vast market of non-kosher meat still exists. Thus, the whole hind quarter of the kosher slaughtered animals are cut away in the packaging houses and sold to the non-kosher slaughtered animals. But a Jew is forbidden to eat the hind quarter of the kosher animal only when the forbidden sinew has not been removed. If it's been removed, you're allowed to eat it. Like I said, there are some that know how to cut that part out. Also forbidden by the Torah is the fat that is known as chelev. Interesting, chelev and chalav. Chelev means fat and chalav means dairy or milk. This is removed from the animal by the kosher butcher. And you shall eat no fat of ox, of a sheep, or goat. Leviticus chapter 7, verse 23 through 24. The forbidden fat surrounding the vital organs and liver is distinguished from the permissible fat around the muscles and the underskin, which is known as shuman. Although the Torah does not specify why this is the distinction between fats, it's interesting that recent biochemical researchers also have noted a distinction between the two kinds of fat. Keep in mind this is mainly in cattle and not poultry. The Torah also prohibits the drinking of wine that is used to be done in connection with idolatry. Such a wine is called yayin nesek. Mere contact by an idolater with a wine at any stage of its preparation was sufficient to prohibit it. Now this is according to oral law. Aside from the fact that anything used for idolatrous ceremonies became prohibited to the Jews, the addition of purpose of weaning the Jews away from the convivial contact with the non-Jews was also a factor in this prohibition. In other words, the whole idea of keeping the relationship between Jew and Gentile apart has a lot to do with the yayin nesek. Now, while Jews today does not regard wine with which a non-Jew comes in contact as yayin nesek, rabbinical ordinance extended the prohibition to ordinary non-Jewish wine, or what's called stam yanim. And this restriction, however, is wine which is pre-boiled. Wine not made from grape, but which are fermented from various fruits or grains, are not included in any of the restrictions, either biblically or rabbinically. So, for example, if you want to have a fruit or grain like beer, it's not at all prohibited in the Bible or in biblical or rabbinical terms. Kosher food in and out in vessels. So let's take a look at that. Kosher food in non-kosher vessels on eating out. Any kosher food item that is boiled, baked, grilled, fried, or broiled in a trefa utensil which has been used for non-kosher meat like fowl or fish which has been used indiscriminately for meat and for dairy is rendered non-kosher in itself and may not be eaten. So there goes Kentucky Fried Chicken's friend. Any kosher food properly prepared in a kosher vessel that is served hot in a non-kosher dish previously used for non-kosher meat, fowl, or fish, or used indiscriminately for meat and dairy is also rendered non-kosher and may not be eaten. The basic principles of the law followed in the cases I just mentioned is the presence of heat. Heat transfers the status of kosher to non-kosher. Kosher food absorbs traces of the absorbed forbidden food and from otherwise clean vessels. Though the sages of the Talmud lived long before chemistry became a science and before chemical theories were advanced. Their ruling today is substantiated by the fact that chemical reactions and activations and interactions of molecules of different bodies take place only in the presence of heat. This is why things that cause transfer, like for example, let's say lemon, onions, garlic, these are even things that we can eat of itself, yet once it's absorbed by meat or fish, it has the power of heat. The above principle of law is the basis for the ruling that when cold kosher food comes with cold and clean non-kosher utensil, the food does not become contaminated by the prohibited substance. It remains kosher and may still be eaten. The only exception occurs when kosher food consists primarily of hot condiments such as mustard, garlic, salt, lemon, etc. This leniency provides eating opportunities for observant Jews who find themselves away from home, from any kosher restaurant or hotel, or may be invited to a non-kosher home. One may eat cold kosher food item that has not been broiled, baked, fried, or grilled on non-kosher utensils. This may even be eaten even if served in non-kosher utensils. A possible menu in this category may include, for example, cold fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, canned fruits, canned kosher fish, such as you wouldn't find in the store, like tuna, salmon, some dairy products, milk, cream, butter, even dry cereals that are easily available almost everywhere you go in the world. Coffee and tea and hot chocolate are also regarded as permissible for consumption by some authority. Since coffee and hot water is prepared and served in vessels which is used exclusively for that purpose, it's 100% okay. Even if they serve it to you in a glass coffee cup, because by us as Sephardim, glass does not absorb non-kosher items. It is one of those differences, as it were, that we can take from a glass of coffee and drink it with no problem. In eating places where special egg cookers are used to boil eggs, there are also some leniencies which would prevail. Eggs cooked in a treifa pot, however, themselves are rendered treifa. The shell of the egg is no barrier to contamination, as the shell is porous and it absorbs whatever it is dunked into. Care should be taken by purchasing bread. Although most European bread generally contains no treifa ingredients, just flour and water, and therefore be relied upon in case of need of emergency, American bread are usually processed with lard. By the way, this is no longer true, so please make that note. The author was referring to the time in which lard was used primarily to make bread. Today that is not the case, which makes it treifa. For example, Cuban bread, by and large, is still made with lard. On the same baking pans and are used in making products with lard are used for making those without. Many of the bread companies today will have its ingredients right there on the label, and you can see that lard is not part of the mixture. White breads are often used with enriched with milk, which would make it a dairy product of a limited use, but even if the problem of lard was eliminated, you have now the issue of milk. Cakes, biscuits, pastries are often made of lard or animal fat shortening. Make sure that says vegetable shortening. In ordering fruit or vegetable, salads in non-kosher establishments should be taken care of to ascertain non-kosher sauces or oils derived from non-kosher fishes that have not been added. One should also be very careful what constitutes the outer limits, what may be eaten in a non-kosher place. Devout Jews often choose not to take advantage of these permissible leniencies and restrict their eating in non-kosher places even more severely. When traveling, they take along their own food, but happily there are kosher restaurants in many major cities, and kosher meals are also provided upon with request by reservation by all domestic and international airlines on many passenger ships. The leniency should also should only be exercised when traveling or when visiting a private non-kosher household, Jewish or non-Jewish, or when invited to public functions or of non-Jewish sponsorship. At such times, such occasions, by the way, the individual Jew asserts his Jewishness and his discipline of his faith when he limits his menu, when he limits what he puts in the mouth according to kosher law. This is what sets him apart under all terms of the covenant. This leniency should not be exercised when invited to a non-kosher dinner sponsored by a Jewish organization, or by any organization whose membership is limited to Jews, or which is given by a Jewish family in celebration of some occasion. There's several restaurants that a lot of Jews go to because it's served, quote unquote, kosher style. There's no such thing as kosher. Either it's kosher or it's non-kosher. Under circumstances, observant Jews who settle for fruit salad while he's less observant and his co-religionists eat treifa meat and treifa fowl, treifa fish, permits himself to be treated as a second-class citizen among his own fellow brethren, and thus are bound still by the covenant as a Jew. Nor should he be subjected to the sight of fellow Jews violating sacred commandments, because there's an issue also of watching a fellow Jew violate the Torah commandments. Any Jewish host, organization, or family which shows little consideration of the observant invitee is so insensitive of his feelings that they arrange things so that he cannot partake equally by virtue of his conscience and religious duty, should expect such a guest to decline such an invitation. I have found myself in many of those situations, my friends, that I've had to decline the invitation because even though it was a Jewish friend, they're inviting me to eat and partake of a Jewish or a non-Jewish food within a non-Jewish restaurant. Methods of koshering that we already covered, where an error occurs in a meat vessel or utensil is unintentionally used with a dairy product, or vice versa, or the utensil may be rendered non-kosher. This depends upon the circumstance, though it is always rendered non-kosher in the presence of heat, and always where there's contact with cold was continuous for a 24-hour period. The same applies with treifa food is intentionally prepared in a kosher vessel or with kosher utensils. Under such circumstance, sometimes it's possible to kosher the vessel and the utensil kosher again by the various procedures that we talked about earlier. Boiling is one of the basic ways of koshering metal and metal pots and aluminum pots, or heat. Remember, heat is what koshers a lot of these utensils. The procedure of using koshering are varied, and they may be done by immersing the utensil in or pouring over boiling hot water, passing it through the flame until it becomes red hot, or by sticking it into the earth like you would do with a knife. If it was used by cutting, for example, a non-kosher meat, you would stab it in the dirt until it rubs off all of the aspect, and then you wash it normally. Vessels used with hot liquid are purged by boiling water. Vessels used over fire without water, frying pans, baking sheets, oven, ranges, and pits are purged by glowing heat, which means we torch them. Most metal and wood utensils, according to the Israeli rabbinic authorities, are also included in the aspect of plastic in this group, can be koshered. Earthenware, enamel ware porcelain cannot be koshered by any means. So if you love your porcelain plates, keep them away from becoming non-kosher, because the only alternative, according to some, is to toss it away. Now, it's possible to kosher utensils that possesses grooves, narrow spaces, and glued or parts, or hard to get to crevices, because they cannot first be thoroughly cleansed out. The basic procedure of all of this in koshering is by boiling. It's as follows. The item to be koshered must be thoroughly cleansed and scored. The item to be koshered and the vessel in which the item is to be immersed must not have been used for at least 24 hours. It is then immersed into boiling hot water. It is removed from the boiling water and rinsed with cold water. If the item to be koshered is a pot which cannot be immersed in a large enough vessel, then a third step takes place. The pot itself is filled with water to the very brim and brought to boil so that the water is overflowing and covers the entire vessel by the overflowing nature. Now, where koshering takes place by glowing, which we put the torch on, same rule applies, except that by the point of immersing, the item is instead held over a fire until it becomes red hot. Ovens and cooking ranges previously used for non-kosher cooking may be koshered by cleansing and scourging all visible parts, followed by heating to the highest level for a half hour. Same procedure is followed for preparation of Passover and koshering ovens and ranges from chametz to make it Pesach kosher. In summary, we finish this chapter 6. In summary, whether the vessel or utensil can be koshered in the first place and the proper procedure to be used depends entirely upon the nature of the utensils, upon the manner in which it became treifa, non-kosher in other words. It's always advisable to consult a qualified rabbinic authority on such matters to determine how to best proceed to correct what may have become unkosher. This is Rabbi Moshe Otero with the Ways of Israel, Dietary Israel. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email or text message me. My email is rabbiotero@yahoo.com or 786-306-8211. And you can text message me your questions regarding your particular situation. Wish you and yours a Shabbat Shalom Mevorach. Our next video will be dealing with family life, which is really the key to happiness.